So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to welcome you to Sunflower Alliance's uh, first webinar of the 2024 season. And we start our meetings with a land acknowledgement. So, we, to be clear, we actively occupy and benefit from stolen land of the Ohlone people who looked after this land for centuries and still live here. The civic infrastructure, the economic system, the private development, and the consumption of natural resources in our society are all connected to and in different ways built upon the colonial occupation of this land and the violent displacement of the Ohlone. We advocate and support efforts for Indigenous land to be returned to Indigenous ownership and management. And we recommend that you look at Sogorate Land Trust. I will put that link in the chat where you can pay a Shumi land tax that goes to uh, restoring Ohlone lands. The format for today's webinar, which is centered on the city of Richmond, we will we'll be talking about environmental justice challenges, just transition facing the city, and learning how the city and region are addressing over a century of environmental justice. Our panelists include Marisol Cantu, who's a grassroots organizer, strategist, educator, and third generation Richmond resident. And she'll be looking at the AB 617 Community Emissions Reduction Plan, and as well as just transition and bringing workers to the table. BK White is policy director for the city of Richmond, where he advises the mayor on a range of complex issues. He was an operator at the Chevron refinery for 29 years and served as president and vice president of United Steelworkers Local 5, the union that represents many Chevron workers. Jamin Purcell is a political activist and organizer. He was a founding member of Richmond Rainbow Pride, and he serves on the May Valley Neighborhood Council, the El Sobrante Valley Planning and Zoning Committee, and he's co-chair of the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and in addition to a lot of other things. And he will be looking at shoreline issues, sea level rise and contaminated sites, as well as county hazardous materials issues, since he has a seat on the Contra Costa Hazardous Materials Commission. So we will begin with Marisol. So please take it away, Sol.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome in. I know some of you. I'm so glad to see you, Steve. I was really glad to see you. Saw Steve a lot on the line, as well as, of course, BK. And so I'm going to share screen for the sake of time and brevity. AB 617 is a state mandated bill that focuses on, let me share. Oops, sorry. I meant to do a slideshow. That focuses on communities that are overburdened, in particular by air quality. And so the funds come from CARB, funnel into air districts, and then the air districts work with communities. And so in the Bay Area, there is East Oakland, West Oakland, Bayview, Hunters Point, and Richmond that have been selected as communities and create a community emissions reduction plan. And this community emissions reduction plan will be voted on in March by our steering committee, and then it'll go up. There's a community steering committee that I'm a part of, and then it'll go up to the board of directors at the air district. And we invite people to make public comments directly there as well. And then it'll finally go through CARB for approval. BK is also part of, he's a government representative on our AB 617 community emissions reduction plan. Um, I'm going to focus on fuel refining. It's close to my heart. It's what motivated me to really get into environmental justice as I witnessed my baby brother go in and out of hospitals as less than 1 years old, not fully understanding the impact, the health burden that our family was having was completely entirely due to Chevron refinery and us being right there. And so although the steering committee, the community emissions reduction plan does have uh, plans for vehicles, for logistics and warehouses, for marine and rail and transportation as well, I'm really focusing on fuel refining in this. And so just to look a little bit more around our demographics and to situate us that right now, of course, our Black, Latinx, and Asian populations are the most impacted by PM 2.5. The red is Chevron refinery. The green are majority blocks of people of color where they live. And then the majority blue box are majority white people. So we have a huge Black and brown and Yemenis and Middle Eastern Asian populations here in our city. And I also want to acknowledge, which I know Sunflower does as well, the historical segregation and redlining that has brought us here. And I want to focus a little bit more on PM 2.5. So we know that Chevron, through the data of the air district, pollutes 63% of the PM 2.5 that we have in our community. And it is the largest source of pollution in Richmond. Beyond vehicles, logistics, any other part, it is the highest polluter. And in our fuel refining group, we really focused on recognizing that it is the largest polluter, so we need more stringent policies. We also recognize that there was a lack of, and there still is a lack of accountability with air district regulations. There's this huge issue of flaring, and we also needed to recognize that there has been a just transition movement in Richmond. And although our community emissions reduction plan is not going to create a just transition, we would be amiss to not recognize Sunflowers, Richmond Our Power Coalition, Richmond Progressive Alliance, all of these coalitions, the Shoreline Alliance's work on what it will take for a just transition. And so the just transition that, and I'll go a little bit more into this a little bit later, just want to recognize AB 617 will not solve every environmental injustice in our community. It was not set up that way. It is simply one tool in the toolbox to hold Chevron accountable, hopefully towards a plan of decommissioning. And so these are going to be some of the actions that are in the plan, and I'll drop the links into the plan. Although the formal public comment is finished, there are ways that you can still email public comments and through the board of directors meetings. So I'll keep Sunflower up to date around that as well. And so for a just transition, I want to be really clear. The air district is unsettled by a just transition. Workers and Chevron are very much unsettled by what just transition is. And they should be, because there's, for a long time, it's finally coming to conversations that is very real for a lot of us in our community. And so what we wanted to do in our AB 617 plan was to just educate our community steering committee members and the air district. to really look at and understand what a phase down of fossil fuels will be in the path to clean air area, because they will be a major part if and hopefully when our lifetimes there will be a decommissioning and toxic cleanup, that the air district will need to regulate that. And we wanted them to start getting on the same page, um, with our community and our environmentalists and our even understanding, what a blue green new deal looks like in Richmond. And the other part of our plan was to incorporate just transition principles into our implementation of our plan. So that's looking at the workers and community being in collaboration and in conversation with the rules division of the air district, of the legal division of the air district, of the compliance and enforcement division, because oftentimes community and workers in particular are left out of those policy makings, and we need to ensure that we are not left out of those conversations. So moving on, looking at flaring, and there's a lot more to each action, if you will. I've just aggregated some of them to set up some of the other speakers like BK. In particular, looking at the city of Richmond's industrial safety ordinance. Right now it mimics Contra Costa's ISO, and I think BK knows that, and I at least will say, you can wipe your ass with it if there's no actual enforcement of an ISO, and it means absolutely nothing if there's no enforcement. So what does it take for our city? Because honestly, the county is probably not going to do it. We were shut down at multiple meetings at the county to make this kind of happen. So we decided to really focus on the city of Richmond, where Chevron is, to really look at what it takes to actually enforce an ISO. On top, 2.2 was really focusing on all of the flaring incidents, changing the thresholds of flaring incidents, being able to work with the Contra Costas. Um, there's an ad hoc, that's an ISO CWS community warning system. So influencing and hopefully creating policies that will allow our community to have texts that we want, that inform us of the health burden, that are language accessible to, that are digestible. So it's data that we just can use and be safe. And that was also 2.3, which is really focusing on the community warning system. Unfortunately, the community warning system is run by Contra Costa County Sheriff. So we're interested in looking at having a Richmond warning system that we could have direct alerts come out from, for example, the fire department, to be able to change how we move in Richmond and get alerted. We'll also be making the board of directors. So incident response and flares is huge right now. I mean, like, that is what everybody from even the county to even the air district is really looking at. So the board of directors at the air district has their own ad hoc where they're looking at communication protocols as well. So we need to triangulate the city of Richmond, the air district, the county, to be able to have and of course Chevron and the workers, to be able to have them get the information to us as accessible as possible. 2.6 is focusing on rules. In particular, rules 12-11 and 12-12, really looking at incorporating health impact analysis. So working with Contra Costa Health to get their analysis, Lifelong Medical, Kaiser, to have that in the rulemaking process. Also looking at enforceability with workers at the helm of that. A lot of times, and BK will explain way more about enforceability. And then of course, just creating more stringent limits on flaring. And I'm gonna look at time. What time am I stopping, Janet? For 30?
Just keep going till you're done.
Okay. Um, and then we're looking at enforcement in particular when our community steering committee, and we also had a couple of USW workers come into meetings, and we had conversations about what happens when we've all been in these chains where we need to call because there's a flaring issue or a flaring event happening or an oil spill, so everybody's calling the air district. But what we're realizing when we talk to compliance and enforcement was that they didn't actually have a standardized inspection protocol. One person would weigh health impacts higher than another person that would weigh workers' impacts, another person that would look at issues chronologically. I mean, it's kind of a shit show out there. So they just need some order at this point. Um, and we're hoping that the workers, at least a couple, would be able to come in and help really understand what that inspection protocol is, as well as increasing inspections, audits, and investigations. Um, and we really tried to fight for specific numbers. So right now there's 6 investigators for Chevron refinery in particular. We wanted to double that. Um, that through the air district just for a loop. They did not want us to dictate how many FTEs were needed in the plant. And so we tried to create through our implementation chapter, and I'll share some of that, a way for us to still hold them accountable on this increase. And so say if there's monthly inspections, how can those be twice a month inspections, for example? And then 3.3 is really creating a collaborative relationship with operators and USW health and safety reps. Um, and BK will share more about how we can try to incorporate USW workers in our plan. 3.9 is to develop a community benefits policy. This was really important because there are fines, although they're very nickel and diming of fines, there are fines that are waged on refineries in the Bay Area, and yet none of those monies actually come back to the community. They go into the air district to pay for their legal divisions and all of that. So we're fighting on creating, and I think this will be approved. Bill Fine is already going to the Air District's Board of Directors to create a Bay Area-wide community benefits policy. Ours was very unique in the fact that we did not want funds to go to the city. We just didn't trust city staff. Although we love our progressive city council, it's not them that make the final decision, and they're not working with the funds themselves. So we felt that we wanted to create a community town hall forum where we could come together, share information on regranting funds from this community benefits policy. And of course, all of the funds reuse would have to tie to air district and climate protection. We've talked about getting air filters and purifiers in every home in Atchison Village, Santa Fe, um, Iron Triangle, Richmond, all of our neighborhoods that are highly impacted. This is another part of our plan is air monitoring and data. So really looking at improving fence line and community air monitoring programs. This is super high level. I can give you more of the real chunk of the plan in the chat. And then also improving source emission monitoring and reporting. And this would be for not just Chevron, but when I'm talking about fuel refining, temp trade, the storage tanks, that everything that's in Richmond that is hitting fuel refining in particular. And then this is my last slide. So focusing on public health, really looking at rules in air district are regulations. So looking at a regulation that would minimize NOx emissions from combustion sources, of course, at the refinery. And they start with white papers at their district, and then that white paper comes, is published, community weighs on in on it. And our through our plan, we're hoping to continue to have conversations with the rules division on and bring workers into that as well. And then we also want to look at CO2 emissions and secondary PM so that we could create a rule in particular on those two emissions. And I'm going to stop share and pass it back to Janet.
Thank you so much. You covered an incredible amount of ground in a really short amount of time. I maybe you could put in the chat um, a couple of links to more information uh, because this is what your group has created over 3 years is like over 1,000 pages, right? So I hope there's a summary somewhere that our webinar attendants will be able to access. Thank you. And I think it would be best if folks have questions that they save them for until after all three of our presenters have finished. So with that, let's we're going to move on to BK White. And as I mentioned before, he is going to talk about updating Richmond's industrial safety ordinance and talk about incorporating the workers of into conversations, as well as what the city's ideas are in terms of the financial impacts of decommissioning Chevron. And I hope I haven't committed you to this more stuff than you want to talk about, BK. But I'll let you I'll let you shoot me down if that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet, and great presentation, Marisol. Um, so I would like to give a little background first on the United Steelworkers and where the RISO came from, and just the oil workers were the oil chemical atomic workers union, and they merged with the paper union and eventually became United Steelworkers. But going back to the 50s and 60s, OCA was very much part in creating a lot of health and safety rules, regulations in the United States. Tony Mazzocchi in 1971 was instrumental in starting OSHA. Through OSHA, our union started the process safety management division, which walks hand in hand with the industrial safety ordinance. Back in 1998, one of our members working at Tosco, which is now Marathon, was killed. In 99, 4 members were killed out there. And it was the first investigation by the Chemical Safety Board. Out of that came the Industrial Safety Ordinance. The Industrial Safety Ordinance was written to prevent accidental release of hazardous chemicals, improve accident prevention by soliciting participation from industry and the community, require industry submit a safety plan, and conduct audits of the plans and inspections of industrial plants. It's a very well crafted and written document. It has absolutely no teeth to it. Industry knows it, and they don't adhere to it. I was sent to represent the United Steelworkers after Chevron in 2021 had a diesel spill into the bay. There was an audit that was written in 2017, so this is 4 years later, and it still hadn't been released. Chevron was suing, and to me, it appeared the Contra Costa Health Services and Hazardous Materials programs were afraid of them. They had this document that they couldn't even give to the group that was supposed to review the investigation, into the diesel spill. And think about a year later, I contacted Contra Costa Health Services and asked for some enforcement on the Richmond Industrial Safety Ordinance. So the Contra Costa Industrial Safety Ordinance was written in '98. I believe Richmond came online in 2022, just as a Me Too, and just to stand in solidarity that like they really cared about the residents of Richmond. They really wanted this enforced. So I called over and they could not give me a name of a person in the city of Richmond. They told me that they did not regulate or make Chevron adhere to Chemtrade adhere to the Richmond Industrial Safety Ordinance, nor could they give me a name. And these industries aren't dumb. They realize nobody's watching. In 2012, there was a major fire at our crude unit, at their crude unit. I don't work anymore. And there were mitigating practices put in to ensure it wouldn't happen again. There were recommendations, mitigations that were put in. And the reason I was calling them in 2022, Chevron had backtracked and took all of the mitigating safety devices. They take them away. So therefore, the agreement that they agreed to in the audit from 2017 didn't apply anymore, but there was no one there to enforce it. So I think our first move with the RISO is just get some enforcement. It's the same thing that we'll echo about OSHA. You write a beautiful document, but you don't enforce it. And the audit, one of the things that it says is community participation. I've been around before the RISO was written, and I just don't know how they involve the community. And the most passive way would be that the community would have a right to the public record of the audits, but that's still not it. That's passive, and that is not any inclusion. And like I said, they're sued where they don't even release it. It'd be hard for someone from the community to even know what that safety audit says, and it also would be hard for the community to know if they're doing the things they agreed to in that safety audit. So the biggest thing is just try to get some kind of mechanism that holds them accountable, some kind of enforcement, and some kind of meaningful repercussions. Marisol was talking about the fines. The fines that are levied against these refineries does not encourage them to stop polluting. If it's to get new equipment that would stop the flaring, the price of the equipment is far higher than those fines. So it makes sense for them to just keep polluting and pay the pittance of fines that are levied against them. But that's the first thing, is to get what we have in place and to enforce it and somehow address this community. It's so vague. The warning system was created because of RISO or the ISO, Contra Costa. But there is no guidance on the levels. Well, it's very loose. And it also lets the operators of the facilities decide in conjunction, supposedly, but I don't think it's in conjunction. I think they get to decide what level that the alerts, when the warnings go out. So there's things like that over this 25 years that we see aren't working. Those are some things we could rewrite, try to put more teeth to it. But for the most part, it's the enforcement of the things that are already written. That's a little I could go on forever about RISO, but that's my little RISO spill. And also, if I could, before I get into the next part on just transition. So just transition was a phrase that was created by the oil chemical atomic workers. And the only thing that we were worried about as workers was transitioning our workers into another job. We've always worked with environmentalists, but environmentalists said, well, we're looking at it as transitioning out of a dirty industry. And so it's always three-pronged. It's the workers, transitional workers. It's the environmentalists, wanting to go to a cleaner energy or, get out of this dirty energy. But the third component, which leads us into my next topic, is the municipalities. And what happens when this industry pulls out with this vacuum, with the loss of funds, with the effects on all kind of amenities that the city has, whether it's the parks or funding their fire department, whatnot. Dan, are you going to put up the link that I sent?
I can if you want to wait just a second, or you can do it.
Do I have? I don't think I have this. I sent you the slide, but on this computer, I don't think I have it.
Yeah, hold on. Let me check.
And one important thing also is that we've always tried to educate our union members that our plight and the surrounding neighborhood plights are the same. We're not the corporation, we are the people, but there's fear mongering within the fence lines of these people are after your jobs, these people hate you, and sometimes our members tend to listen to that and support the company more than they should, and they should be supporting the community. And it's a constant battle because daily they have the company has their ear and is influencing them. That there's these mean, nasty people that are trying to take the jobs away.
Okay, sorry. Let me get this. It's slow on account of being in Zoom. Sorry. Okay, one more second.
I can start it without it if you like.
Yeah,
okay.
go ahead. I'll keep looking.
So there was a cause for concern. We had a financial report that came from the city, and they were saying we can't count on the taxes or the monies that Chevron has paid as part of a settlement, and it was $4 million missing. So what we decided to do was do a long-term financial analysis of the city's budget under proposed alternative scenarios, and we took it to council. And we discussed that the city of Richmond relies heavily on revenue from the petroleum industry, and it's induced economic activities to perform a primary activities expected of a municipality. In addition to the taxes received from these industries, the city relies on tax revenue from businesses that sell petroleum products. So we also have like terminals, of course, gas stations, auxiliary businesses support petroleum industry operators, local businesses who support. So even the restaurants and stuff, there's like this trickle down effect of if we did lose this one industry. So, one of the primary goals of Mayor Martinez's administration is to diversify our economy, find a more green economy at the same time. So, in a June the 6th, 2023 agenda for the city of Richmond's fiscal year 224, the staff warned us that the UTT, the utility users tax, average increase of 1.1%. As mentioned above, the revenue category has individual revenue streams going to the very distinct directions. The revenue category also includes the Chevron tax settlement, which ends fiscal year 2024-2025, meaning the city will lose revenue of $4 million annually. And we asked this assessment. I was very involved high up with our union, and I saw cities across the U.S. when refineries were shut down, unexpected. I have friends who lost their jobs, Delaware City, Philadelphia, all throughout the U.S. But also, history has taught us um, the collapse of the coal industry in Kentucky, uh, automotive industry, and the loss of jobs sent overseas in manufacturing. We've seen, cities decimated. We've seen Flint, Michigan. We've seen these cities decimated. And when these corporations leave, whether it's by choice or by mandate, um, what's left of the surrounding community is decimated. And usually that is a lack of leadership, forethought, or always believing that the industry would be there. So anytime that you rely too heavily on one industry, there's a potential for this happening. In 1982, the number of operating refineries in the United States was 254. And as of January the 1st, 2023, there are 124. So that's like 130 less refineries. In September 2022, the Union for Concerned Scientists released a study predicting 75% of refineries in the United States will close in the next 30 years. We've seen in the Bay Area, in my local, that I was both president and vice president. We were over, which is now PBF, was Shell before, and Marathon, which was Tesoro before. We've seen Tesoro decrease their staff by 70%. We've seen Phillips 66, which was not my local, was local 326. We've seen a reduction of like 40% of their workplace. So it's happening here. And if the city doesn't plan for this loss of revenue, it could impact the community and the citizens of Richmond in a very adverse way. So from medical service to sidewalks to the unhoused, a lot of ways it can affect us. So in our meeting, we had people coming to the defense of Chevron and asking if we spoke with Chevron. But in the communities where we've seen the retraction of the refining business, there was no forewarning. They wait up until the last seconds and they just pull up stakes. If they were concerned and respect for the residents in the communities in which they operated, it wouldn't start the day they were leaving. They would treat them with more respect at the time that they're operating those plants. And so I was asked point blank, did I talk to Chevron? Do we know what Chevron's going to do? I told them I didn't know what Chevron was going to do, but I know what the state's going to do. And the state said that 100% of the sales of new passenger cars and trucks will be zero emission by 2035. It shall be a goal of the state that 100% of medium and heavy duty trucks in the state be zero emission by 2045. All operations were feasible, and by 2035 for drayage trucks, it shall be further a goal of the state transition 100% zero emission off-road vehicles and equipment by 2035. In September 2022, in a press release, Governor Gavin Newsom's office summarizes the thrust of the California climate commitment, which includes a push to cut out air pollution by 60%, reduce state oil consumption by 91%, reduce fossil fuels use in buildings and transportations by 92%, cut refinery pollution by 94%. Cutting the refinery pollution by 94% will probably come with some closing of refineries. And as a union person, as we talk to our members, it's the same as the city. You cannot close your eyes to this and put your head in the sand. It's coming. There will be a time. Now, it's a big ship. It doesn't turn very fast, but the time will come when technology will have caught up, and there will be alternative fuel sources, and refineries will be much like the dinosaurs that they process to make profit will die. In 2022, California Air Board approved a regulation banning the sales of all new gas-powered cars by 2035. So all of these things are saying the same thing. And as a city, as we're looking, we're trying to welcome in green industry. We have to make sure that it's not greenwashed. We know a lot of little dirty tact issues while getting in touch with lawyers and seeing what the definition of green is. So we're trying to be real mindful to make sure that we don't get greenwash technology, that it's actually green technology. We're looking at wind energy, and we are looking at whatever industry that we bring in as good paying union jobs, livable wages, health benefits, and will cause prosperity for the whole of Richmond and not for a few. That the working class people of Richmond will get an opportunity to make a good living and be proud of what they do and not have to leave the city for employment. So, let's see. So, okay. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I was going to do in conclusion, we have in short continued to hedge our city's financial future on increasingly unsafe bet. Necessary changes in the energy sector require careful planning to ensure that the city of Richmond is prepared for scenarios wherein the local petroleum industry contracts, the reliance for significant portions of the utility tax revenue on the negotiated agreement that expires in the near term highlights the need for analysis of policy options to ensure stable, sufficient revenue. Prudent economic planning would also anticipate extensive site remediation costs and massive layoffs that will result in a decline of the petroleum industry. But those important factors are beyond the scope of this item, but they're important. Site remediation. Marisol talked about the fines from the air board, and when we met early on, I told her that I believe the people who are directly affected should be taken care of. And it's not a payoff. It's giving money to a general fund somewhere in Sacramento or to the air board does not lessen or help lessen the effects of the lungs of the youth, the elderly, the people who are breathing the air that is coming out of the refinery. Site remediation, there's got to be something in these monies where these taxes that are being paid, that it doesn't just go into a fund and you're buying just new police cars or whatever that is earmarked for. There's going to come a time for remediation. And if the city is going to look forward and be ready for the loss of revenue as far as taxes, they also need to be forward looking at over 100 years of a hydrocarbon based industry that has leached things in the ground, that has been there before regulation, before there was any thought to what they were putting in the groundwater. And so I don't know how we do it, but unfortunately, EPA does not hold industry to a strong enough standard in remediating land when they leave. So it's a complicated issue, but it's one that we have to solve, or else we could end up like the communities that we've seen around the United States, where it's just left with devastation.
Wow, that's a great note to end on, BK. But it's so critical, and this is something that kind of segues into what Jamin is going to talk about, which is shoreline issues in Richmond, because we have as 32 miles of shoreline, which is more than any other bay community, and much of that is Chevron shoreline, and they have resisted and continue to resist any efforts to talk about taking care of the land that they're on. So I just wanted to say one thing, and that is, someone asked for the slides, and I will share them to the email list because they're in the form of a PowerPoint. So I'll do that after the meeting. Thank you, Marisol, for sharing them with me. And so BK answered the question, how much of the city's revenue comes from fossil fuels? And he said 20 to 30%, quite a bit. So I guess that's quite an introduction for Jamin. And if you're ready to go, Jamin, please let us
Right.
know what we can do. Thank you.
Well, we will start with we're gonna talk about what the situation is that we're dealing with. You know, so we're gonna talk about rising sea levels and groundwater intrusion. So so this has been something that has been really important with regard to addressing our many toxic sites that we have here in Richmond. Like we over the next by was it 2100, we're expecting about 3 feet of sea level rise. And because of that, over the next 76 years, we are going to be having a lot of groundwater intrusion. So in case people don't know, well, first we have climate change and it is causing the oceans to rise. But because the sea level, or I'm sorry, because the seawater is denser, when it comes in, it doesn't just flow over like a wave like we would think of when we think of seawater. It actually also permeates the soil really deeply. And here, because if people don't know, the bay has had a lot of fill. A lot of that is marshland. A lot of that's very sandy soil. It's very, and it's able to be permeated by water very easily, as opposed to like, you know, ground, what is it called? Bedrock. So as the water is coming in, essentially what happens is that the water that's currently within the soil, because all soil, unless you're in a desert and a few other places, has like some level of moisture that is held within it, and it gets deeper as we go to our water table. As the seawater comes in, it's going to start pushing up that fresh water. Now, here within the city of Richmond, we have what? Oh, we have well over 150 some odd toxic waste sites along our 32 miles of shoreline. We have some toxic facilities as well. But in particular, over the next 76 years, about 21 of these toxic facilities, including Chevron, are going to be subjected to flooding or annual flooding, like we have seen already with some of the king tides. Has anybody seen some of the king tides or heard about that word? Yeah, we had that nice little picture of the guy in Marin in a canoe going down the parkway, his little park path, which is supposed to be inland. Well, similarly, we're going to have seasonal tidal risings, but as well, we'll have a consistent tidal rising coming from just the general rise of the ocean level. So what does that mean? Well, it's going to affect us in a number of different ways. One is really easily, it's going to start pushing water up. That's going to mean that we're going to have flooding. We're going to have flooding in creeks. We're going to have flooding in some of our waterways that have that were co-opted by humans, like the natural creeks that we try to use when we were building our original city. But we'll be having more and more flooding in neighborhoods and in places like schools and places where we have thought that there was that we could just pave over and it would be fine. But this water is going to keep pushing up. But further, what this means for toxic waste sites is that we have traditionally, and I think it was like the 80s or so, we had this idea that like, oh, we'll just put a cap over things. And if we just cap it, it's fine. But, you know, that'd be great if the water was coming from the top, but that's not what we're talking about. It's coming from the bottom. It's going to be pushing that up. So, well, that means it's going to come to the sides and it's going to be pushing around. And And so these caps are not going to be as effective as what their original intentions were. But even more so, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be pushing up a lot of these toxins that we were capping into the other places that we were trying to keep it from. We have very few places where we did like a liner on the bottom before we put the soil in and a cap, particularly here in Richmond. So that's one part of it. Another part is, of course, it's going to also when we have a lot of precipitous rain and we have a lot of water coming in, we're going to have as well a lot of our old waterways kind of start filling up even more. And so again, it's going to keep pushing all of those toxins and those things that we have been trying to control into a wider area. And so more people are going to be affected. But as well as it's coming up, one of the things that we rely on is our sewer system, right? Like everybody, I'm sure saw that amazing presentation by Veolia recently. Well, we have these sewer systems that as the water is rising, if the sea level reaches these pipes and it fills them, it no longer is able to function in the same way of what it was intended to be used for, to get that water out. You know, we use a lot of gravity for our sewage systems. So as we have that water filling up, that means that we're not only having problems with our sewage systems, but as well, it's allowing for those toxins to actually permeate into the sewage system as well. I don't know if many people know this, but a lot of our sewer system was done a long time ago, and they have clay pipes, which are cracked and inundated with roots and dirt and all these other things. One of the reasons why it's so expensive to fix. But that also means that it's subjected to all the things that are going to be brought with that water that's contaminated. So why are we worried? I mean, is it like going to be smelly? Well, of course it's going to be smelly, but the worst part is that there's a lot of VOCs, or volatile organic chemicals, that are going to be released into that, be held in that water that had been held down. It's going to push out gases that normally would be contained or might not have been released, will be able to enter into through our sewage systems and be able to enter in through things like our toilets and through some of our catch drains. And so this and you okay, anecdotally, like they had a problem like this on the East Coast, and that's why there's homes in like I forget what, Pittsburgh, I want to say, or Philadelphia, where they have a toilet at the bottom of in the sub basement, and it's to try and flush everything out, because you would have this rise and you would get an overflowed toilet. So you'd put one really down low, so that way if it was going to overflow, at least it wasn't in your house. Well, we're going to have things like gases and things like that coming through our sewage systems as well. So now, I mean, I've mentioned some amazing, fun things to look forward to, like things coming through our toilets and our gases. We're going to have our sewage system probably start failing. We're going to have flooding. But I can't leave off the most exciting part, because we're here in California. We're in the Ring of Fire. That means we have earthquakes. Now, if you don't know the geology of this area, a lot of it is really sandy. Really, really sandy. Well, what happens when we have earthquake in a sandy soil? We have liquefaction. And in particular, when you have a lot of moisture that is being held in the soil, you're going to have a lot more of that liquefaction. And that means that it's just going to exacerbate the issue, because you're going to have more soil being dragged out into the sea. You're going to have, it's going to be releasing and cracking any of those caps. And so we have like a perfect storm of things that will be coming with regard to our impending sea level rise and what we can look forward to. But I want to touch back on what Marisol said, which is when we're looking at who are the people impacted this, is it going to be the people who run the businesses? Is it going to be the people who live up on in the nicest parts of towns? Well, I mean, I think the answer. It's not going to be those people. In particular, it's going to be really focused. Most of the impact is going to be along the 28,000 what we call socially vulnerable impacted residents within the Bay Area. Because while this is where we're talking about Richmond, this is going to be affecting all of the Bay itself. And as it so happens, when we have toxic waste sites, usually the housing that is right next there is unfortunately where a lot of people were redlined into, where a lot of lower income people are, where a lot of more where we forced a lot of the working class and people of color. The biggest people who are going to be impacted are generally the people who are not as able to engage in this because they're at a different, they don't have the flexibility and the freedom of time to be able to advocate for themselves in the way that we would really would hope anybody could be able to. What has been happening, at least within the city of Richmond, is that Gail McLaughlin actually brought this to the city council. We had the person who first introduced me to this issue. It's like you kind of knew about it, but we had a really amazing person named Christina Hill. She's an associate professor at the University of Berkeley, and she's an urban ecologist and urban ecology and hydrology. Yeah. And so she gave this really amazing and with beautiful slides about what we can expect and how if we don't address this is not going to go away. This isn't going to just we can't deny it. This is something we have to address, which at least within the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, the way that we would wish to address it is that we would like to get rid of the toxic soil. Now, we can only do so much with regard to, being able to stop the rising tides or what we're eventually going to be calling the toxic tides. But we are going to be able to do something with regard to trying to fill in some of that advocacy for those communities and for the future communities that are going to exist along the shoreline, because we know that what the plan is currently is everybody is trying to build housing, but where they're planning to do that, in low-income neighborhoods. They're trying to displace the single-family homes to be able to build up, and they're doing so with complete disregard of what the future holds. And I think, this is something that I'm sure many on this call have already heard, but AstraZeneca is a great example of that, where it is a development that is promising housing, but really it's promising really unsafe housing. And I'll leave it at that without going too colored on it. But it's like between the rising sea levels, between the contamination of the soil, between the release of VOCs, and in the surrounding area, all of these things are going to make the shoreline less and less hospitable, less and less able to be even saved or remediated or anything to be done with it. So that's at least what we at the Richmond Shoreline Alliance are trying to do, is to bring a focus on this and remember and don't let people forget, because there's a lot of people who don't know about Hackthorn Superfund site or Hackathorn Superfund site or Liquid Gold. That these Superfund sites, Liquid Gold is radioactive. And these are not going to go away unless we do something to take them away. And, unfortunately, we don't have a magic wand where we can wave, but we do have the ability to try and save what bay we have and make sure that the bay that we have in the future will be one that will not be hostile to us and not be carrying in the toxic tides into our streets, into our bathrooms, and into our families. So I think that covers a lot of it. But I think I'm also going to be speaking about what the Hazardous Materials Commission is going to be doing. So, Janet, do you want to ring that in, or should I just segue over?
You're doing a great job. Please keep going.
Okay, cool.
Segue away.
All right, let me. All right, so I'm on the Hazardous Materials Commission. I sit in the environmental seat, or one of the two. I represent the Richmond South Shoreline CAG, and as well, I will say I will give the caveat. I am not the chair. I am not the spokesperson, but I can report my interactions and my observations, as well as what my knowledge is of what they're doing. So the Hazardous Materials Commission is very interesting in my opinion, because one of the things that it tries to do, and I sit within, they have a main body, and then they have these two others of, planning and policy, and then operations. Operations is about more like that reaching out to the community and that community engagement. And one of the things that we have had over the last years, we've heard about a couple different hazardous waste sites. One up in North Richmond. We've been dealing with AB 617. And one of the things that we're really kind of learning, one of the things that we're covering, should I say, because many of us already knew it, was that the notification of residents and people around these sites is abysmal. It's based off of antiquated ideas of notification, like putting them in newspapers, which we don't have functional newspapers in the same way as when those things were originally kind of drafted. Sometimes they have distances of like 300 feet or 150 feet in some cases which depending on where that site is, it might be barely make it across a freeway. Or it might be some businesses, which businesses don't necessarily know what all of it's talking about. But the thing that I'm really finding is that people are very aware of it on this committee, and it's because they're dealing with it constantly. Number of them are from a couple of the unions. Some of them represent business, and some of them represent tax associations for some reason, general public, and we have some of the really knowledgeable people about hazardous materials and the treatments and chemistry of it and dealing with it, but they aren't looking at the fact that we don't have a lot of policy, and we're not making the policy changes and suggestions that we really could be advocating for. One of the things that we're going to be doing in the next year is actually we're going to try and address some of these things, or at least give some recommendations, because that's all this commission can do, is give a recommendation to our supervisors. But we are talking about what levels of engagement and what levels of information should be clearly given to people when they are building on a hazardous waste site, when they're going to be kicking up the soil and releasing it into the air. Is 300 feet really enough, or is it absolutely not enough, in my opinion? Or when we're talking about things like how we are implementing our general plan, right? We just did this wrap up of the general plan that's being reviewed, and they took a lot of our suggestions, but they actually took a lot of the very conservative suggestions. They did not take the ones that are actually going to be helping the people who are the most harmed. What they have termed from EnviroStar, which would have been disadvantaged communities, which we have said are impacted communities, because the community didn't create the problem. The community was subjected to the problem. It was inflicted upon them. But we even go into simple things like we don't even have a brownfield cleanup plan. And that's something that we have, people think we have one, because if you Google it, Contra Costa brownfield cleanup plan, it says that, but it's all of its reports. It's completely mislabeling of it. So what we're hoping to do is try and find ways of suggestions to try and push for better notification, to make sure that there's an obligation of the city to not be just an arbiter, but actually an advocate for the community. This is something that we really have talked about, is what is the role of government in this? It needs to be active. It needs to be, you know, actually stepping up in the role where oftentimes communities don't have the expertise, don't have the availability to advocate necessarily with full knowledge. And then as well, what level of honesty and what level of openness is the developer going to have to give and before we start issuing permits and stuff like that? Because once we get to a certain point, you know, the train's out of the station, and by the time usually that's when like community gets involved is on this very, you know, last minute end. Then there's nothing they can do because a lot of the legal stuff has already kind of gone around them, gone over them, and basically they collect their public comments and they say thank you and continue with what they were doing anyway. So as well, we're going to be talking about our sea level rise issues, and because we are having that also along the north side of the county, along the where we have another refinery. What is that? Phillips. I always get it wrong. 66. Yeah, and Rodeo, and we, you know, these we have to be paying attention to these because because even if it isn't right along the water, and of course the refineries are, but this water, the sea level rise is going to be impacting a lot of our county, and it's going to be making it a lot worse. And then one thing we're also looking at, which we haven't looked at before because it is very new, is we're going to be looking at what is the health impacts of people who have been, who are within range of who are frontline communities of the refineries that are now using vegetable and animal fat as the source of creating their fuel, biofuels. Because, you know, these are quite new, and, you know, people can get like smells, but they don't know what to really kind of make of it because there's just really, we haven't put together the research. We haven't informed the public in the way that we really ought to. And so those are going to be the things that we're going to be really pushing forward. So if I was going to say what would be the very next thing, what will people in this room be able to help with? Well, I could say that I would point us to, we're going to be addressing the reviewing of AB 617, the Richmond Community Emissions Reduction Plan. And quite frankly, there's a lot of resistance, and it's from people who don't understand what just transition means. It's from people who believe that the world will fall apart if Chevron leaves. And, you know, people who are just fighting for what they think are the preservation of jobs. But, you know, I said this in a meeting, and this is where I guess I'll close out, which is that, you know, Richmond is one of the most resilient communities. It is one that it already had an economic collapse when the shipyards closed. It already had the disinvestment when that happened. But the difference is that nobody was out there advocating for continuing the war to save jobs. Nobody was out there saying, let's keep fighting in order to be able to, because, you know, our economy will be bad. They understood that it was harmful to everybody and their community. It was harmful to the people in the world that it was around. But that's not the case with Chevron. We have people who are actively fighting to keep it open, to keep doing the same thing, despite knowing the impact it's having on our community and on the world. And so this is the difference. This is the thing that I try to bring, is that we know how to look to a brighter future and move on when something is bad. And so, you know, I really hope that we could get, when we do address this, AB 617 coming up at our hazardous materials, please show up either on Zoom, either show up in person, although in person is always better because it is a lot harder for them to pretend you don't exist when you're sitting in the room with them. because they want to pretend people are not resisting this. So those will be coming up, I believe, on the next meeting or the meeting after. And we have our meetings in the last Thursday of the month. And that's where I'll close out. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jamin. That's very, very inspiring words, because Richmond is resilient, as Marisol said. So we have a few minutes for questions. So we'll start. If you want to go ahead and raise your hand in Zoom. If for some reason you can't do that, please put your question in the chat. So I'll first go to Shoshana.
Thank you all. 3 great presentations. We could use another 4 hours of this, frankly. You want to hold a master class, I'm in the front row. I just wanted to first make a comment and then raise a couple of questions. And that comment has to do with a common factor between the refinery that was decommissioned and altered in Philly and what's happening at AstraZeneca. The same company has conducted the remediation, so-called remediation, on both sites. In the case of Philadelphia, and at the time, it seemed like a really huge community victory to get rid of that old monster. The sad thing is that what is now on site is a massive warehousing complex. Think of what could have happened there if remediation had been more adequate, right? So in some ways, that's a mixed bag. That's kind of a negative. Let's hope we can do better here. Much, much, much better. And one of the reasons why Hilco, at least here locally, got away with its kind of inadequate remediation plans is DTSC. I think it's important to kind of evoke the name of that agency. Department of Toxic Substance Control decided that everything was all good. And once they have spoken, it's like God on high, right? So that's kind of serious. But moving along, I did want to kind of address a couple of issues that BK raised. Yeah, we have to think about actually invoking and bringing in genuinely green industry and not just doing greenwashing. We have a situation here with biorefining now. You referred, BK, to state analysis. It kind of went by me pretty fast in your slides. Some state agency that basically described the refining of biofuels as interim and maybe just a 30-year phase. What really concerned a lot of environmental activists who have very strong labor sympathies, right, was that we are, first of all, afraid that biorefining is going to be around for, at least 30 years, maybe longer than that. We were indeed very concerned about further job loss. And I guess the direct question I want to raise here, and this is like a really difficult question. So we were very worried about the P66 and Marathon conversions. In the case of Marathon, there was fear because of the tremendous increase in hydrogen use, that there would be a real possibility of increased flaring and fire. And indeed, a tragic, tragic, tragic accident happened at Marathon. Has put a Marathon worker, is putting him through living hell. Thank God he survived, but wow. So we're really concerned about this. The Board of Supervisors made no effort to put any guardrails on those projects whatsoever. My question is, and we were really faced with a terrible dilemma, and it was directly a jobs versus environment dilemma. what can we do on the state level to at least get safety nets in place right now for impacted workers? Because I understand that, and I'll just shut up now just one last time. We understand why Local 625 would be absolutely supportive of the bioconversion and not happy at all with the position that environmental activists were taking. So there's my question.
May I answer?
Yeah,
Please.
please.
Yeah. So right now, United Steelworkers, along with APN, Blue Green Alliance, University of California, and I think that's really it. They're working on legislation to see and a way to make the employees more employable, to train them on green jobs. But the just transition, when it was coined by by OCA, meant that you would get like wages, like benefits. So training someone, who has a livable wage, and then giving them a solar panel job for $10 an hour is not a just transition in
Right.
labors. So we're working on some stuff, and one of the challenges, one of the first things we're working on, is that these refineries hold all of the certificates for the workers. So when you leave, those certificates stay with the refinery, and all the chemistry, that we do, the welding, all the stuff that we do on a daily, they hold those certificates. And when you're retired, terminated, or if the place shuts down, you take none of that with you. So that's one of the big challenges now that they're working on. But there was different ways. There were some funds that were obtained, but there were more band-aids. Give somebody some pocket money. We were trying to set up the younger workers who aren't that close to retirement, and to give them other options to work in. It doesn't have to be industry, but they are very skilled employees. But the owner operator of those facilities hold all their paperwork, all of their qualifications.
Wow.
It's wild.
Wow.
Thank you. Steve Ongerth, you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead, please.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for these wonderful presentations. I'm really honored to be connected to all of you. I just want to make a few quick comments and just also offer what I can. First of all, just a note on the sewage, in Richmond, I believe Veolia runs that, so it's a privatized system, and I think getting that back into public hands should be a priority. Secondly, I would recommend everybody listen to the latest episode of the Energy Transition Show with Chris Nelder. The decline in fossil fuels may happen a lot quicker than people think, for a number of reasons. And third, the main sort of meat of what I want to offer is being a member of the Inland Boatmen's Union, which is an ILWU affiliate. And I remind everybody, pay attention to the water too, because that's included in what goes on in Richmond. But I am on the e-board of the IBU. I have been appointed their green rep. It's mainly to deal with offshore wind. There is the potential for offshore wind jobs, including potentially training and or manufacturing in Richmond. I know that's been discussed, but let's keep that on the radar. But also, if there are issues you want me to bring to the ILWU's Northern California District Council, please don't hesitate to contact me, and we can have the dialogue. I mean, this includes everyone from steel workers to the city to whatever. There is a lot of desire among the ILWU to help out with these things and do the right thing. Right now, we're trying to have a dialogue with the Yurok tribe in Humboldt County about missing and murdered indigenous people. We want to make sure that the wind power does not involve more injustices. So this is something, just reach out to me. We want to help.
Thank you. BK.
You're muted.
Thank you. So, and thank you, gang. We are working a lot on wind energy. That is one of our big initiatives. We've been working on it since March of last year. Justine Burke is online, uh, very, very strong ally who's helping us with that. A lot of knowledge, and also working with your union. So yeah, and any job that comes to the city will be a union job as long as this mayor's there. So we're trying to give people alternatives. No one is born wanting to work in the industry that I worked 29 years. And we're no idiots. I'm gonna tell you right now. We're smart people. We understand what's going in our lungs. We understand how that cuts down our life expectancy. And so we trade off our long-term future for our families for this, for the short-term sacrifice.
I would just like to add something, and that's incredibly powerful, BK, and I want to acknowledge that. What Steve said about Veolia, the city is entertaining the idea of ending the contract with Veolia. It's up in 2027. Veolia has been a nonstop bad actor, not just in Richmond, but in many other communities. And this coming Tuesday night at the city council, there will be a discussion. So if people are interested in making comments, I'm putting my email in the chat. Just shoot me an email and I'll send you some talking points from Communities for a Better Environment. But I gotta spell it right. Okay. I think I got it there. That looks good. Okay. Thank you. So I will entertain one more comment or question. We have 2 minutes left. And otherwise, if folks want to, they want to get on with their afternoon, we will. Justine Burt, thank you. Please go ahead.
Just want to let everybody know here, because I've interviewed many of you separately. The Richmond Green Blue New Deal, for which my team is consulting with the city of Richmond, 2 weeks ago submitted the first draft of the main report to the city. The city council members and the mayor have it, and so we're waiting for their feedback, and we'll do a round or two of comments and then graphics and get it out to the public for everybody's opinions. So just want to let you know where we're at with that project. I can't wait to share with you like what the highlights in the report, but I can't do it yet. So just know that's coming. Thank you, Janet.
Fabulous. Thank you, Justine. I know this is work that is you've been doing for years and years. And it's great that you brought this to Richmond. So I think we're close to the end. Thank you so much for coming. If I will send out the recording to everybody who RSVP'd to the meeting. And if you have more questions or ideas, feel free to email me. And don't forget to sign up for the Sunflower Alliance weekly announcement at sunflower-alliance.org. Thanks, everybody. And
can I just say one thing?
Of course.
Sorry, one last thing before we go. I want to thank BK and Steve for being here. I was really happy when you said something that I had said in the Hazardous Materials Commission, which was that the reason why environmentalists are aligning themselves with union workers is because environmentalists are on the frontline workers that live there, but we know you guys are spending by choice 8, 12 more hours in those toxic environments, and that we have had a hostile relationship when you are being impacted. And so we're trying to understand, we are trying to shift over to the future where we are working in concert, that we are all understanding and open about what's going on with our future, because we're all going to have to live in this world together, and we want everybody to have a better outcome. So appreciate you guys being here.
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. See you next time. Take care.